What's up, everybody? Trey Biddy with Hog Sports coming to you from Razorback Stadium, Fayetteville, Arkansas. First walk and talk of 2026. Wrapping up the first spring under Ryan Silverfield. This one with a 14-13 win by the red team over the white. We'll talk about what happened in this game a little bit, obviously the quarterback competition and everything, but it's important to note that there were 14 other practices before this one, 11, I should say, of which were open to the media. So I want to talk about some of the things that I saw after this roster building process, all the work that they did putting this together. 65 new players on scholarship on this roster alone. So we've got a lot to get to, probably going to be quite a walk and talk. As for what happened out here on the field today, probably give the edge to KJ Jackson in terms of quarterback competition, just because he did have a 65-yard throw to C.J. Brown, probably 35 yards downfield. C.J. Brown did the rest of it. And A.J. led a couple of touchdown drives, but he also threw a pick six. Probably 53 yards to Song Ginu. I think I got that name right. Bear with me if I mess up on some names here and there, if I have to think about a name. There are a lot of players to get to. So probably give the edge to KJ a little bit. Did have some nice throws, picked it up a little bit more. I think with KJ, he's got to get more consistent. He'll be very accurate, and then he'll just kind of have some lapses here and there, and he's got to get more familiar with the offense, which AJ has a little bit of an advantage because he comes over from Memphis. AJ has got to get a little bit quicker on his throwing motion. He tends to dip the ball way down here, kind of like a baseball throw. It just creates this big looping throwing motion for all the stuff that Arkansas does with a short passing game, throwing swing passes to the running backs, throwing screens, the RPO game. You got to be able to get the ball out quick. So that's something that he can work on. If it's just dropping back and slinging the ball, yeah, he's got a really big arm and can really throw it. So anybody who knows stuff that I've talked about in this offseason knows that I've said I wanted Arkansas to go out, probably have to spend $2.5 million to get a proven quarterback. I don't know that it was a great transfer portal quarterback class, but you just never know what you have at quarterback until it's game time. You can think, go through spring football, fall camp and everything and come out and think, oh, this is the guy. He gets hurt and the backup comes in. You're like, whoa, this guy's a star. It happens all the time. I've mentioned like Stetson Bennett, all the work that Georgia did to bring in somebody else to replace Stetson Bennett. He goes on and wins 2 national championships. Felipe Franks ended up at Arkansas because he got hurt, and then Kyle Trask steps in. I was like, whoa, this guy's really good. So that stuff happens all the time. Let's don't even talk about Drew Bledsoe going down and Tom Brady coming in as his backup. So you just never know what you got. And that's the thing that scares me the most, because overall, guys, I like this roster. And it's important to remember, and we've learned this over the years, everybody else has access to the transfer portal. It's not just Arkansas. Everybody else is able to fill in depth and all that kind of stuff. It's going to come down to coaching, in-game decision-making, penalties, turnovers, special teams, of course. Those are the factors that it comes down to. They do spend a lot of time working on special teams. They spend a lot of time on ball security work, probably more than I've ever seen in any coach that I've covered. The amount of ball security drills that this team does is a lot. So it'd be disappointing if they came out of this with a bad turnover margin. So that's good. Of course, in-game decision-making is going to play a big role as well. Let's talk about some of the positions, because we got a lot to get to. It's going to be a long walk and talk. It just is. We haven't done one this spring. We usually do one by now, but just the way things played out. So we talked about quarterback. It really is those two guys. Hank Hendricks is coming in, but he's a junior in high school right now, so I wouldn't put too much pressure on him, too much expectation. Hey, before we get to that, I'd like to tell you about our friends over at Sutherlands. Nice weather, you're probably getting outside. Maybe you're looking at a zero-turn mower or something like that, and there's nowhere to put it. You don't have storage, you don't have shelter for it. So if you need that kind of stuff, then check out our friends over at Sutherlands, because they've got all kinds of buildings. They've got barn dominiums, they've got sheds, they've got workshops, barns, garages, just about everything that you could need. And there are 4 locations in Arkansas, so there's probably one pretty close to you. And also just know, yeah, I set off the alarm. Also just know there are Arkansas people. A lot of them went to the University of Arkansas, even though they're based in Kansas City. So know you're supporting Razorback fans when you support our folks over at Sutherlands. 1-800-66-BARNS or Sutherlands.com. Running back. Saw some good things from the backs today. I like Cam Settles. More and more I see him. I think he had like 7 carries for 57 yards or something, had a nice touchdown run up the middle. He just kind of seems to see it. We didn't see Sutton Smith today run the ball. It just kind of worked out that way. Maybe it was through the RPOs and stuff like that. So that was disappointing, because throughout the practices, the one areas, that I really wanted to focus on in this game were running backs and linebackers, because you don't see a whole lot of live tackling unless it's like goal line type of work. And so I was looking forward to seeing that, but really like what I saw out of Settles. Braylon Russell ran the ball hard up the middle. I mean, he's a load. Braylon has really transformed his body, still got the weight in the good parts, but you can see like his belly's flatter. He looks, I think that they have some guys at the skill spots, like, those two guys I mentioned, Sutton Smith, we can go off what we saw at Memphis, and, Jasper Parker had some good runs today. TJ Hodges, you can still see a little bit of the youth with him. There was a 3rd and 1 where, he kind of hesitates instead of just hitting it and getting that first down. There was another time where he cuts the ball, it's outside, and you can see like, hey, split these defenders, keep going vertical, and he cuts it outside, and there's no more yardage gain. Of course, on this level, you get tracked down by some of the speed in the SEC. So there were a couple of things like that. He fell down on another play. But I do feel like that they have some good quality options. You also got Markeelan Batten at running back. So I feel like you do have some good options at running back. Is there a 1,000-yard back? I don't know. If Braylon Russell stays healthy, I could see them, mixing it up quite a bit, just depending on the opponent. Wide receiver, disappointed to see Chris Marshall drop 2 third-down passes today. Can't do that. That's supposed to be your big play guy. He knows that. Antonio Jordan made 2 really great catches. Like, it's going to be hard to keep Antonio Jordan off the field. And he's listed as a third-team X right now, behind Courtney Crutchfield, who has transformed his body, 20 pounds lighter than he was when he arrived. You can tell he's taking things real seriously. He had a 75-yard catch maybe last week on a slant. It wasn't a short slant, but he just took it to the house. So I feel like they've got some options. Those are all X's. I mean, you talk about some of the guys like C.J. Brown, who is, as KJ described him, the first guy in the gym, just seems to keep getting better. Had that big catch today, just very consistent. Just gotten better and better, I think, in the time that he's been here at Arkansas. So you've got him. You've got Jamari Hawkins, who I don't know if Hawkins had more than maybe a catch or something today, but he's a guy that, obviously produced at Memphis. I mentioned Chris Marshall, who's better than he showed today. And Ismail Cece, I don't know if Ismail had a catch today, but as far as the guy that most consistently gets open, most consistently catches the ball when it's thrown his way, he's been very steady. We didn't get to see Cece last year because of the wrist injury, but he's another guy that, and I feel like I keep, Blair Urban and DeQuane Prevost are some younger guys that have got a lot of potential also. And I'm probably leaving somebody. They don't even have Jelani Watkins here yet, who's still with the track team, because he's super fast. He was a former 4-star recruit, went to LSU. Donovan Faupel is another guy to keep an eye on, but they're probably going to end up with 6, and I think it's going to be really hard to decide not only who their top 6 are, but maybe who your top 3. Right now, like going into this game, I'm like, well, maybe I would think about moving Courtney Crutchfield over to flanker, have Chris Marshall in there, and Ismail Cece. Now I'm thinking, like, how can you leave C.J. Brown off your starting group, because he's just been very consistent. Got a little thunder. I hope this isn't dangerous. I think this is plastic. So, thoughts at wide receiver. Tight end, maybe a little thin. I mean, you've got Maddox Lassiter and I'm spacing on it. Max, spacing on a name already. But, more H-back types, full-backs. And you've got Jaden Platt, who we know Jaden Platt's a very good tight end. And I think Ty Lockwood might be. Ty Lockwood's a guy that started his career off at Alabama. You've got a lot of guys like that played at big-time programs that are maybe a little bit younger or playing behind other really talented guys. But Lockwood, if he can be a guy for them and they can go some of those 2 tight end sets, that would be really beneficial. I think the offensive line as a whole has a chance to be comparable to what it was last year, which last year I thought they were an above-average offensive line, all total. And I think they have a chance to be that. You got a couple of guys back from last year's team, obviously. You're bringing in Malachi Breland. Bryant Williams was a really big get at right tackle. And then you're looking at Kavion Broussard to step in at that left tackle spot. I think they have a chance to be comparable. Whether it's a little bit better or a little bit worse, I'm not sure yet. That's pretty much the offense, isn't it? They'll leave out any position group. And they've got some guys behind those players, obviously. And then, switching over to the defensive side of the ball, really love this defensive line. Like, I don't know that there's a superstar aside from Quincy, but when you look at, I gotta avoid this camera crew here so I don't mess up their shot. But when you look at Quincy Rhodes, the guy who had 8 sacks for him last year, you know, he's a future NFL player. Hunter Osborne, I've been very impressed with his knowledge of everything. But it's like you roll out one guy who's like, give or take 6'3", 315, one guy after another, you know, one guy after another. So you got Hunter Osborne, who started his career at Alabama, played a lot for Virginia, which was really good last year, probably their 3rd defensive tackle at Virginia last year. You brought in Carlin Jones, who I like it a lot. He'll be a redshirt sophomore this year. So last year as a redshirt freshman at USC, playing behind some really good, really talented players ahead of him. Zadavian Sims, you brought him in from Oregon, who was a top 100 type of recruit, another 4-star guy, playing behind some really good guys at Oregon. You know, so it's just like Trajan Odom coming in from Ohio State, was a 4-star recruit by some recruiting services. You know, those are some of the guys that you're brought into this program. And you've also got, you know, Keandre Johnson and Caleb Bell and Reginald Vaughn, guys that came back from last year. Trent Sellers, who's over at Jack, and we'll talk about Jack here in a second. You also got David Oakey coming back. I mentioned Quincy Rhodes, you know, as far as some of the older guys coming back. And you've got Antonio Sandal Bascom, who I've seen at practice, like physically, he looks like all of them. Like just, again, 6'3", 315. And then we get into Danny Beal, who's 6'5", 348 or so. Will probably help them in some maybe goal line type packages or something. And you got Anthony Kennedy. Like, I can name 9 guys on that defensive line who were former 4-star prospects by at least one recruiting service, you know. And a lot of those guys maybe weren't highly regarded as transfer additions, but they were very highly regarded as recruits and are coming into that age where you start to see them make an impact. Quincy Rhodes, if you guys remember, did not make an impact really until last year when he was a junior. Charlie Collins moving over to that jack position. Charlie Collins is hitting that age right now. You know, Charlie probably has had a better career to this point than Quincy did, but I feel like that jack position is kind of custom built for him. You know, he's too tall and lanky for a linebacker, not heavy enough for an even front defensive end, but that's probably the most competitive spot on defense right now. Jamonte Waller, former top 100 type of guy from Auburn. Steven Souls, who may have had 3 sacks today. I told him, I was like, hey, you had a sack today? He goes, no, I didn't. I had 3. It's like they're trying to protect the quarterbacks. I had 3 sacks. Love that attitude. He's a very explosive guy. Gets off the ball very fast. Wants to add a little bit more weight. He's about 235 right now. Wants to get up to about 245. But you've got him. You got Jamonte Waller. You got Charlie Collins. And Trent Sellers is probably a little bit behind them. But I couldn't tell you right now who I would start between those 3. Maybe Steven Souls after today. So good competition at that spot. And linebacker, you got Bradley Shaw, who you draw up a middle linebacker. That's how they should look. Jaquavian Smith out of Howard, probably the biggest surprise. Maybe he shouldn't have been a huge surprise because he comes, you know, he comes from Howard, but he was also heavily recruited by Auburn and other teams and stuff. But he started every single practice that I was at. He was a starter at linebacker. You've also got Wyatt Simmons. Phoenix Jackson's finally healthy. Ben Bogle, Evans. You know, you've got some potential there at linebacker. Safety concerns me because I know just through the transfer portal, it seemed like they kept missing on some of their top guys. They've shifted some things around. So Kamori House came in. I thought he was going to be a linebacker, but no, the whole plan was for him to be a star. That's where he was recruited originally out of high school by Ron Roberts, where they tried to recruit him the second time. He ended up playing linebacker, going to North Carolina, led them in tackles. But, you know, at 6'1", 205, and he's down weight a little bit, he's just a better fit for that nickel star position. I was originally concerned because they had Christian Harrison at star also, and I'm just thinking these are these are easily 2 of your top 11 defensive players. You don't want them at the same position. You want them on the field at the same time. And eventually, you start seeing Christian Harrison at safety. Okay, I like that a lot better because safety is an area that gives me a little bit of pause. Curie McGlure has seen a good bit of action there. He's a former cornerback who's 6'3", from West Georgia. He's played a lot there. They've actually moved Carter Stoutmeyer, who started at safety for Colorado the last couple of years. They've moved him over to that star spot. He's right now backing up Kamori House. But I just wonder about safety a little bit. You've also got Miguel Mitchell back. Hell, it couldn't be any worse than it was last year, I guess. I say that, and you know, I get surprised all the time, and they are worse. But they do have Christian Harris in there, so he is a good player. And I think that they've done a better job at cornerback, getting Joker Johnson in here, who was very highly coveted out of the portal. A lot of teams wanted him. A lot of SEC teams wanted him. Lakai Rowland's another good one from Maryland who started for them there. Braden Lee, we didn't see a whole lot because he's a little beat up this spring, but he played a lot for Maryland last year. DJ Hairston has probably been one of the surprise guys. Oh, I didn't mention Tay Lockett, sorry. As far as freshmen go, and I'm hesitant to ever put a freshman safety on the field. I don't ever see any good ones. You know, they end up being good players, sure, but like freshman linebackers, freshman safeties, you know, hell, everybody on defense. You don't want a freshman defensive lineman in a lot of cases either, unless they're 6'5", 348 like Danny Beal. But, you know, Tay Lockett's been pretty good. But DJ Harrison seems to consistently be around the football. And they got Shelton Lewis also from Clemson, who played a lot for Clemson last couple years. So all of that to say, I want to go back and circle around to what I said before. We're starting to get a little bit of rain. I want to circle around what we said before. Everybody in the SEC has access to the transfer portal. And it's important to recognize when we talk about, like, yeah, they've got some depth here. They've got some good size. You know, last year they struggled depth-wise. I think it's obvious also that don't hit me. You see me? I think it's obvious also, just following them through the transfer portal, those 2 chaotic weeks, well, it was really 3 weeks because it kept stretching on, that they do have more money than they had last year. And that was, you know, with Sam Pittman, like, we can talk about the in-game decision-making and some of the other issues that they had, and maybe bringing in some of the wrong players, especially on the defensive side of the ball last year. But they did not have the same amount of money that they do this year. I think that was obvious through the portal. So it's important to recognize that Auburn, South Carolina, everybody else has access to the transfer portal just like Arkansas. Everybody's building depth. It's going to come down to those important things. In-game decision-making, penalties, turnovers, special teams, culture that you build with this program, all that stuff, and having a quarterback. And guys, like, we can talk about what Arkansas's win total prediction might be. Right now, I'm not going to come out and say, like, you know, even though I've said all this stuff, I'm not going to come out and say that they're going to be above 500 next year. Because I think the odds probably are that you don't just have this great quarterback coming out. And if you listen to a recent interview with Guys Crowley, who did, I thought, a really good job, you know, kind of leading the charge and assembling this roster, as far as the GM standpoint goes, you got to have plus play at the quarterback position. You got to have an elite wide receiver. You got to have offensive line, defensive line. That's what you have to win in this conference. And, of course, win penalties, turnovers, special teams. We're getting inside just at the right time here. So it's impossible to predict, even for the coaches, I think. I don't know that they're going to know what they have at quarterback. But I think that they put themselves in a good position from the personnel that they put around the quarterback right now. So that's my thoughts on it. Appreciate everybody following along with us. Be sure to check out Sutherlands, our friends over at Sutherlands, 1-800-66-BARNS, Sutherlands.com. Get a free quote. You know you want a barn dominium. Everybody wants a barn dominium. Everybody kind of like, man, I don't know. It'd be cool though, wouldn't it? It would. So you should at least check it out. And if you're going to do it, go to Sutherlands to do it. 4 locations in Arkansas. Arkansas fans, good people. Mark, Bo, the gang over there. All right. Anything else we forgot to cover? So my hand is, I don't know what I did, the way I'm trying to hold this because it's got this reflective thing on it. It's completely numb. Fingers feel like wood. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. All right. That's it. I think I covered everything except for special teams and didn't see a whole lot. Connor Smith blew out his knee, who's probably going to be their punter. Maxie Gilbert seems like he'll be fine, but again, it's kind of like quarterback. You just don't know until you get him out there. I don't know. Anyway, we just missed the rain. But thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll probably get you another walk and talk here soon. I know we went too far. That's too long a time to go without a walk and talk, but we have done more shows, so check us out at Hog Sports Live. Go to Hog Sports, HAWGsports.com on the 24/7 Sports Network. We're 50% off right now. There's still portal stuff to do. Yeah, that's it. That's the walk and talk today. All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining me. This has been Trey Biddy with HogSports.com. We'll catch you next time.